A new awareness among black people.
This institution is like many other institutions, which means it's a racist institution.
The most unprotected person in America is the black woman.
For a black person to get an education in this country, he's got to have a lot of guts.
Black.
Hello and welcome to Unspoken. I'm your host, CiCI, and you are about to enter what I like to call the hashtag #BlackSafeSpace. Now, this is a place where we just come together and have open, candid conversations about the black community. Joining me today is Jonathan Burke, a trainee solicitor who's going to be speaking about his experience as a black man in the UK practicing law. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
So tell me about your experiences as a black man practicing law.
So I think one of the key things that you notice straight away as a black man in a law firm or in the legal profession is just how few black people there are, and specifically how few black men there are. And I think the Law Society figures suggested that it's about 1% of lawyers in the city are black. Sometimes they try and like conflate the figures together, so they'll have like the BAME or like the ethnic minority, and then that will kind of boost it. But when you actually dig down and see how many black people there are, it's very few, and there tend to be more women, I think, than men, black women than men. And yeah, it can be. I mean, so far I think I've been quite lucky in that my firm have been really supportive, and I mean. At my firm, for instance, there's only one other black lawyer in my office, but she is the most supportive person. She's from the US, and she's like really outgoing, like really outspoken in terms of issues that we might face as a black lawyer. But also, I've been quite lucky also that I've got support groups that I'm part of that mean that the black lawyers that are around my age in the city, I'm able to network with them, and if I've got a problem or if there's some issue that I have, I can go and discuss it with them and say, oh, do you know what, this happened at work today and I wasn't really too happy about it, and we're able to talk together and kind of support each other through that.
And why do you think there are so few black lawyers in the profession? What's going on?
Well, law is an elitist profession as it is, so the standards are really high in terms of access. You need to have got certain grades. They're not going to be too flexible on grades, for instance, and traditionally you would have to have gone to particular universities, so your Oxbridges, your Russell Group universities, and maybe black students might not necessarily have initially got like the A-level grades and then gone to the right universities. Maybe they wouldn't have realised, okay, I needed to be working hard from GCSE level to get, to be on sort of the right track, to get the right A-levels, to then go to the right uni. So by the time you've actually, you're at university and you're applying for law firms, you're already at a disadvantage. But even having the grades is only half the battle, because even the process, the application process, the assessment days, actually writing an application form is quite difficult. And you need to have an idea of how the process works to be successful, I think. I think traditionally, black people haven't had access to that information to kind of prepare properly for those kind of interviews. I think I don't want to say, I'll say it, I think there is a certain degree of nepotism as well. So a lot of the time partners are making decisions. So if you're in an interview and you see someone that looks like you, there's definitely going to be like unconscious bias. Like if there's someone who's, he went to Oxford and then somebody he's interviewing went to Oxford, it's like, oh, we went to the same college at Oxford. Oh, did you know so-and-so? Oh yeah, my dad works for that firm. And all of a sudden he's thinking, I like this person. So he might have been a 6 out of 10 interview. And then because, there's this kind of unconscious bias, that person might get a job. Whereas there might have been a black candidate who actually was a 9 out of 10 candidate, but they didn't have that connection where it was like, oh, we went to the same uni, like, my dad knows your brother or something, and then there's, maybe that decision's been taken not to give him the job, whereas maybe that person did deserve it. But yeah, I think the law profession now has tried to make strides to become more diverse. They've tried to make that application process less influenced by those kind of factors as well.
So how do you navigate through, this type of system? For you, like, what was your process? How did you kind of maybe avoid that nepotism, or did that benefit you in any way?
So, like, when I left university, so from a young age, I wanted to be a lawyer. From probably about 13 or 14, I was like, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. This is what I want to do. I did my work experience, and I thought, yeah, this is me. This suits me. This is what I want to do as a career. And then when I left university, I was visiting law firms and trying to work out what kind of law firm I wanted to work for, what kind of law I wanted to do, and I'd go there and I wouldn't see anyone that looked like me, and I thought, do you know what, I don't think I would fit in here, and it put me off for sort of 2 or 3 years from applying. But I was working in the city, I was working for a couple of investment banks, and I think that helped me to kind of build up my confidence and think, do you know what, if you are good enough, then you'll get through. You shouldn't kind of you shouldn't be dissuaded by, you know, your own opinion. Like I was kind of self-selecting out of applying. It's not like I'd been rejected, I just didn't apply because I assumed, you know, I wouldn't enjoy it, kind of thing. So I thought, let me actually like go for it. And yeah, there were a few times where I might have gone to an interview, or I'd done an internship, and then at the end of that internship, you were meant to get, they give out offers for jobs. There were a few times where like I performed an internship, and I thought I'd performed really, really well. Like other people have been like, oh yeah, Jonathan, do you know what? I think you've definitely got it. Or I'll be in an interview, and I'm thinking, yeah, this interview's gone really well, and I won't get it. And then my feedback will be like really kind of, there won't be like a definite reason why I didn't get it.
You were really, really great, but you're not quite the right fit.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be fit. Yeah, a lot of sometimes it was fit. One time we weren't sure you wanted it enough, and I was like, I don't really understand. Like, how do you know what I mean? Like I'm at the interview, like I'm prepared.
Here.
Exactly, I want the job. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, sometimes it just wasn't. I didn't understand the reasoning behind why I wasn't getting through. But yeah, for me it was perseverance, and also there were. Like now in the city, there are a lot of organisations which are geared towards equipping black students with the skills and expertise to get through these interviews, and they pair you with mentors and stuff like that. So I had a mentor who was really, really encouraging and really positive, and said, look, you are good enough to make it, so just keep going. And yeah, support from family and stuff as well. Like my mum and dad were really supportive of kind of what I wanted to do, so that all helped. And yeah, I guess the drive to actually want to do it, it was something that I really wanted to do, so that pushed me to eventually get there.
So how do we as black people get involved in the law? Because I know like in America, I've seen, people represent themselves and can go without having lawyers. Do we have that same access to do that here?
Yeah, depending on the particular scenario, you can represent yourself, for instance. So say if you were to get like a speeding ticket and you went to court and you didn't maybe have legal aid, or you didn't have the funds to pay for a solicitor yourself, then yeah, you could represent yourself. And often for the minor things, you might be better off just representing yourself, because the law might not necessarily even be that complex. You probably could research the law and be able to represent yourself for certain things. Having said that, there are certain issues where you would need to get a lawyer for sure. There's certain other things which, yeah, you would definitely require a lawyer. But things like the Citizens Advice Bureau as well are really, really helpful. I often tell people when they come to me for advice, if they say like I can't afford a lawyer, that's a great place to go. But yeah, there are certain things where you can definitely represent yourself, but equally there are other scenarios where yeah, you should really look and seek the advice of, get some proper legal advice for sure.
And what are kind of the differences between the legal system in the UK and the US? Because oftentimes when we are comparing the two places, that's where we always compare the US. So kind of what are some of the differences have you noticed over there in comparison to here?
Look, there are lots of differences. I think one of the big ones is that there are two systems that operate in the US. So you've got the state system, and then you've got the federal system. So a lot of times, you might see someone who's been arrested, and they might say, there's the federal count and then there's a state count or something. So there's kind of two laws that operate together. They place a lot of emphasis on state law in the US, whereas here we just have the law of England and Wales. We don't have like London law and England law. We just have the law. So that's probably one of the big things. And also in the US, they have things like, they have prosecutors which are elected. So if somebody commits a crime here, the Crown Prosecution Service will be the ones that are in charge of making that person go to court, and they'll be the ones that prosecute or try and prove that this person has done the crime. Whereas in the US, you have like an attorney general or someone like that, or the state prosecution office, and they've been elected, so they're either a Democrat or a Republican, and people vote for them to then go and set the laws and then go and catch people. So it's kind of different in terms of they politicise the law a little bit more in that regard. And also I think there are major differences. Like for instance, you've got the death penalty still in the US. We don't have things like that here in the UK anymore. And I feel like the sentencing is a lot stricter in the US. So even like the recent Jussie Smollett case, so they've just slapped all of these misdemeanor charges on him.
What does that mean? Could you break that down? Because they were talking about felony charge. What is the difference with like indictments and felony charges? Do we have that sort of similar? So
I don't think we have felony and misdemeanor anymore in the UK. So misdemeanor is less serious than felony. Felony is a more serious crime. Misdemeanor is slightly less.
And he's got 16 of these.
Yeah, he's got 16.
Charges, yeah. And
a lot of time in the UK, they won't have them. Like you won't add the sentencing together in the same way that they do in the US. So say if it's like a 2-year sentence, it will just be like a 2-year sentence. In the US, they'll have like 16 charges, and they'll all be worth 8 years, and they'll just add all of them together. Whereas maybe here we might have it running concurrently. So if you get 2, then it might just be 2 years, and then 2 years, you just do 2 years as opposed to 4 years, whereas there they'll just do 16 charges. Each one's worth 2 years, you'll do 32 years in prison. So in those instances, the US can be a lot stricter as well. And what impacts does that have on the black community in terms of the sentencing? So over here, are there the same disparities when it comes to a black person and a white person committing the same crime in comparison to the US? I know I recently saw an article about 2 young white guys who were selling drugs, and the judge basically ruled kind of no prison time because he felt that their text messages were articulate, and there are people currently doing time in prison for the same crime. So kind of how does the disparities work, or have you noticed that in your... So I think one of the big issues in the UK in particular is that judges are often old white men. They're never, it's quite rare that you'll get a black judge. It's quite rare that you'll get a female judge. I think it is improving slowly, but a lot of the time you won't get somebody who will empathise with a young black boy, for instance. They might not necessarily see that a young black boy hasn't had the same opportunity that other people might have had, that have come from a slightly more privileged background. And you'll see things like this. I think there was another instance where there was a girl who was at Oxford or Cambridge, and she stabbed her boyfriend, and they didn't give her any prison time because she was so clever. And it's like, well, you've committed the crime. Like, if this was somebody else who had less opportunity than she had, they would still go to prison. So I think, the law should be applied to everyone the same way. And I feel oftentimes people are not maybe taking into consideration the backgrounds of black people, when perhaps there could be a little bit of leniency given, but they'll take into account the fact that the text messages were written in a coherent, clear way. That's not something that should have an impact on the sentence. And you'll see in the US as well, now that they've legalized marijuana in a lot of states, there are so many black men that are in prison now on charges of drug possession, selling drugs, this kind of thing. And we know that marijuana is more prevalent not even necessarily more prevalent in black communities, but black men are caught with marijuana. They go to prison for things like marijuana charges, whereas now you see white people in Colorado and all these places that are actually making legitimate businesses out of it. So you can see that the law has, in the US and in the UK, disadvantaged black people and ruined their lives, because now coming out of prison, particularly in the US, you're an ex-con. Nobody was going to want to hire you. Here, it's similar. I think maybe there's less stigma attached here, but these kind of long sentences for minor charges where other people from different backgrounds are getting let off definitely are things that are not right, I don't think, and definitely disadvantage the black community, and it's something that shouldn't happen. So what do you think that not only the black community can do, but you as a lawyer, do you think, is that something that you would like to challenge, or other lawyers should consider challenging? I think it's something that I'm not in support of at all. I think it's something that we can challenge. I think for me, I'll be honest, I work for a big corporate firm. We don't do criminal law as such. The only sort of criminal law we do is like big white collar criminal investigations, which would be like fraud, bribery, corruption. We don't do sort of day-to-day criminal stuff, but we do a lot of pro bono stuff. And the kind of things that I would be in support of in that would be certainly looking to try and empower people in the community to have a better understanding of the law. I think sometimes just having an understanding of how the law can impact you is important. I think a lot of times in certain communities, maybe people don't respect the law as much as they should. So I think, yeah, like young people maybe sometimes think, that maybe they're not even scared of prison, for instance. Might see prison as like a badge of honor, but then they're not necessarily seeing that, okay, you might have committed this crime, but in 10, 15 years time when you're trying to get a job, you can't get one, because the first thing they'll ask is, you know, do you have a criminal record? And if you do, then, you know, they're probably not going to give you the job.
And how long does a criminal record last for?
So it depends. It depends what type of crime it was. But I mean, I'd have to double check, but depending on the crime, it can be up to 7 years that it will stay on. And some crimes stay on forever, depending on what time. So for instance, like sexual crimes will just, you know, you'll just be on the sex offenders register forever. So those kind of things you can't get away from. So yeah, it is, you know, quite serious. Obviously, something that people do need to kind of educate themselves on as well.
And what would you say the best way to educate yourself would be? Because sometimes the internet does provide a lot of kind of false information, and sometimes you don't necessarily know where to always get the best resources from. So, and if you're not someone who's able to maybe go to university or, you know, for various different reasons, but is still really interested in the law, is there any resources that you would recommend?
I think the government website, gov.uk website, is really good. It sort of provides a lot of information in terms of, you know, various offences and your rights under the law, that kind of thing. You know, the Metropolitan Police website as well. A lot of the time people won't be aware of just simple things, and I think just having a quick Google on those kind of websites will let you know. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but the Citizens Advice Bureau as well are a good place to look, just for basic advice. So, yeah. And
obviously then they give you legal advice, but they can't necessarily like represent you or there's some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, limitations with citizens' advice. Yeah,
so they wouldn't necessarily represent you, but they might be able to just kind of, it will be almost like common sense advice, but sometimes you just need somebody who's maybe a bit removed from the situation to be able to kind of say, look, this is, you know, these are your options, this is what I advise you do, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what they're, you know, maybe good at doing.
So how would you kind of advise someone to kind of break down some of those barriers, those trust issues that we know is in the black community when dealing with law? If you've got a lawyer that doesn't quite look like you, what would be the advice that you would give?
So I think one thing to bear in mind is that all lawyers, we're all like highly trained. We've all gone through quite a rigorous process to become, you know, a solicitor or a barrister. So I think we have professional standards that we have to upkeep. So, you know, the standard of service that we're going to provide is kind of regulated by the Law Society, by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. So we're not trying to, you know, if we sort of fall below a certain level, or if we do something which is morally not sort of in high standing, then that will sort of impact on our professional integrity. So it's highly unlikely that somebody would look to give you dodgy advice just because they don't look like you.
So where do we get these disparities from in the law? Would you say that it's more outside of the legal profession's control, or is it something else going on?
I think, for me personally, I think the biggest, I think the police, and I think a lot of the time people kind of maybe equate the lawyer to being the same as the police kind of thing, whereas necessarily you've got like the prosecution side where, yeah, they are trying to, if perhaps you've been arrested for a crime, the prosecution are trying to prove that you've committed the crime, but the lawyer that is representing you, they're there to help you. They want to, you know, get the best for you, but at the same time, you know, they can't lie for you. You know, they can't, you know, make up evidence for you, because that's then them breaching their professional standards. But at the same time, they, you know, they do want to do the best that they can for you. Particularly those that are working in criminal law, that is something that they're, you know, they're passionate about. You wouldn't just pick criminal law because, you know, I had a whim one day and I decided I wanted to do criminal law. There would be a reason why you've done it. Criminal law isn't necessarily the most well-paid area of the law. So if they are in criminal law, it is likely that there's some reason, something that's driving them to think, I do want to help people. So that's always something to bear in mind. I know there's other areas of law as well, like maybe immigration or, various other areas of the law that people might have interaction with lawyers with as well. And again, I would point to the professional standards that lawyers have. We don't just get up one day and become a lawyer. It is a long process. So people, lawyers will want to ensure they'll have a certain professional pride, and they'll want to ensure that they do the best for their client. It's bad for business if somebody does a shoddy job for you. They're not going to get, you're not going to say, oh yeah, do you know what, Jonathan, he represented me the other day and he was rubbish. Like, I'm not going to get any more business off your friend. Whereas if I do a good job, you might say, yeah, do you know what, that lawyer was excellent. And I think a lot of the time we do understand that the law does have like such a massive impact on people's lives. Like, that decision could change your life. So we are, I think we are cognizant of that fact, and we do want to ensure that we're doing the best that we can as a professional, just anyway, because that's what we do, that's what we've been trained to do. But also because, we do have a certain obligation or, duty to our client as well. So.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming in and speaking to me here
My
at
pleasure.
Unspoken. It's been great. And if you would like to know more about the legal profession in the UK and how you can get involved, make sure you check out the links below. Make sure you subscribe, share and comment. Thanks so much for watching.